Hey guys, what's up? This is part 2 of my beginner's guide on how to use Tails OS. In this video, I will show you how to set up a Tails Linux virtual machine. This is a great way to try Tails Linux itself, without the need to create a bootable USB stick. You cannot permanently install Tails Linux into a virtual machine, however, if you leave it to boot off of the ISO image, it will keep booting into Tails every time you start up the virtual machine. Please keep some things in mind however, because there are some things you need to know before setting up a Tails virtual machine. Number 1. Only use Tails inside a virtual machine if your host operating system is not compromised with malware. If your computer has a keylogger, malware, or other malicious software installed, then this will break the security feature of Tails, because for one, if your main OS has been compromised, and in the case of a keylogger being installed, Tails and your host OS can keep sensitive information you may be typing in, and for 2, both your host operating system and your virtual operating system can see what you are doing, so please use a trustworthy computer that has not been compromised in any way, shape or form. Number 2, only use a Tails virtual machine if leaving traces on your hard drive isn't a worry to you. Traces of your Tails session are likely to be left on the local hard disk. For example, host operating systems usually use swapping, or paging, which copies part of the RAM to the hard disk. This is why Tails warns you when it is running inside a virtual machine. Please listen carefully to what I am about to tell you in this next bit. A Tails virtual machine does not modify the behavior of the host operating system, and the network traffic of the host is not anonymized, unless you are running the host operating system through a VPN, or proxy. The MAC address of the computer is not modified by the MAC address anonymization feature of Tails when it is running in a virtual machine. In other words, Tails cannot anonymize your main computer's MAC address, only Tails will have the anonymous MAC address. And finally, number 3, you will need to have an appropriate software virtualization tool, such as Oracle's VirtualBox. To get started, you need to have the appropriate virtualization software installed on the host operating system. Different virtualization software exists for Linux, Windows, and Mac OS. I highly recommend Oracle VirtualBox, because it is a free and open source software virtualization tool that allows you to run various operating systems, and it is simply the easiest to use. To get started with using Tails in a virtual machine, please make sure you have these 3 things on your main PC. First, you will need to have the Tails Linux ISO file, which can be downloaded from the Tails website at tails.boom.org. Next, you will need to download a virtualization tool, such as VirtualBox. Finally, you need to be on a PC running Windows, Mac, or Linux, and make sure your host computer supports hardware virtualization. This can usually be enabled in your BIOS, but if this feature is already enabled on your PC, you can proceed with this tutorial. If not, I recommend you find a tutorial on how to enable hardware virtualization on your PC, as I do not have a video on how to do this. So, without further ado, let's begin this tutorial, shall we? So, assuming you are prepared for this tutorial, you will need to open VirtualBox, or the appropriate virtualization software installed on your PC. Next, create a new virtual machine, and call it Tails. After that, click on Next, and give it the appropriate amount of RAM. I recommend at least 1 to 2 GB worth of RAM. Click on Next, and you will be brought to the screen, where you are asked to create a virtual disk for your virtual system. Leave everything as is, until you get to a part where you can configure the size of your hard disk. I would recommend leaving it at 8 GB, as you will not be installing Tails to the hard disk inside the virtual machine. After that, click on Finish, and you will now need to go to the settings for that virtual machine, and change a few things. Go to the Display section, and change the video RAM up to 128 MB. Next, go down to the Storage setting, click on the blue icon that looks like a DVD, and click on the yellow folder with an up arrow, and locate your Tails Linux ISO. Once you have done that, click on OK, and you can now start your Tails Linux virtual machine. Please run a VPN or proxy before you start your Tails Linux virtual machine, to avoid alerting the government that you're using Tor. Alternatively, you can use a bridged connection within Tor itself. Okay, that's all for this video, folks. Please remember to hit that subscribe button, and do be sure to give my videos a thumbs up, it would be much appreciated. Okay, bye for now.